Hi, and welcome to the world of PHsPeed. My name is Rosie, and in this series of videos, I will introduce PHsPeed version 2.0. In this video, I will show you how you can create fully responsive web pages. Responsive web design or responsive design is an approach to web design that aims to make web pages render well on various devices with different screen resolutions. Depending on the size of the form, Bootstrap will render the page differently, as you see here. When you make the screen smaller, Bootstrap will break columns into rows whenever required. The way this is happening is under the complete control of the web designer or developer. So what are the rules? To start with, PHsPeed makes use of the Bootstrap grid system. That means that a form consists of panels that contain rows with columns, and that columns have fields. Bootstrap divides panels, rows, and columns into 12 units. These units can break into new lines, depending on the size of the screen and your definition. So if you put a column into a line, you need to specify how many units this column will occupy. 6 units mean that you have 2 columns, 4 units mean that you have 3 columns, and so on. The trick to responsive websites is that you specify these for each screen type. Bootstrap 4 is aware of 5 different screen types: desktop Excel, desktop, tablet, phone, and mobile. In PHsPeed, you will find these properties in the device class group. As you can see, the total number of units is always 12. So now you know how to make a page responsive. But that doesn't mean that there are no pitfalls. If you have to display a large grid of data like in this example on a large desktop, you can't expect it to show well on a small mobile phone. Initially, the columns will get smaller, but the grid is too broad at some point as it does not know where to break. In cases like this, you have to find another way of displaying the data, like here. Bootstrap is very flexible and allows you to create good-looking forms with superb usability. In PHsPeed, you control Bootstrap by setting properties for layout, color, sizing, and more. Let's make a simple responsive login form with the rules in mind. First, I add a new runnable module. This is just an example of a web page, so I do not need a database connection. When I create the application, there is a basic page containing a form with a few essential components: a root component to define that this is a regular page, a form, and a panel. I will start to add a header to the panel. As mentioned before, PHsPeed uses Bootstrap. So if I want to stay with the Bootstrap principles, I need to set colors using the Bootstrap standards. Here I pick Success, which corresponds to green in the current theme. Every component contains properties. The panel header component allows me to add titles, change text color, apply logos, and much more. One thing that I consider a great feature is the ability to change some properties, generate the application, to review my changes, and revert stuff I don't like or make additional changes. Super handy for prototyping. One thing to keep in mind is that PHsPeed contains a lot of security measures. One is that you are not allowed to use an application module directly, and if you do so, PHsPeed will redirect you to the main application. As this is inconvenient in a test situation, I allow this module to run standalone. To avoid that, PHsPeed needs to deploy images on each generation cycle. This is a manual process. You only have to perform this action when you add new images. You can reuse already deployed images in the image property editor, which is handy for logos or other standard images. Now it is time to add the rows and columns for storing the user ID, password, and login button. You can add each row and column, one by selecting them from the component toolbar, but here I use a faster way, by using a grid function. I need 3 rows with 1 column. Then I apply the total 12 units for the column in the row so that the edit fields will occupy the entire width. When this is done, I add the 2 edit fields and button from the component toolbar. Finally, I regenerate the application and watch the result. This form gives a good impression, but it is not done yet. To improve, I need to add titles above the fields, remove the default content, and bring some color into the login button. All this is done by setting properties. If you are a PHP developer, you might want to know that you can set all these properties by code. PHsPeed is a low-code tool, which means that you can come far without a single line of code, but eventually, when you need to apply specific behavior, you can change it by using PHP code in the component's events. I discuss that in another video. Every Bootstrap-controlled element has a default margin and padding. Of course, you can modify these by changing properties, and PHsPeed has a property editor to set the margins and padding, as I will show you here. Now the form is done, I will show you how to set responsive properties. This form is too wide for my taste, and I wanted to adapt to the display's resolution. It should occupy the entire width on small mobiles, but I only want to use a part of the screen on a desktop screen like this one. Also, the current form is tight to the browser above, and I want to increase the space. I want a larger gap than Bootstrap allows me, so I use a generic margin here. This generic margin is maintained in the root component. Every PHsPeed module contains a component that controls the behavior of your form. The root component is used for regular forms. Besides the root component, you also have a building block for reusable elements like headers and footers, or master detail relationships, a blank which can be used for creating APIs or bind to messaging gateways, like PayPal. You are always in control of changing the form. Using the form designer, adding images, changing sequences, and moving elements are possible. In the next section, I show you how to apply a logo left to the input fields. To be able to, I need to make a row with 2 columns. The first column will hold the image, the second column will contain the rows and columns of the input fields. The easiest way to achieve this is to create a new row with 2 columns, and then move the rows of the original form into the new column. Then add the image component and apply an image. Of course, I need to set dimensions for the responsive behavior. This might sound like a lot of work, but if you are a bit experienced, this is a process of minutes. As I mentioned before, if you want a row that needs to be responsive, you need to set the number of units to a sum of 12. On small mobiles, lines should not break, and therefore the number of units is set to 12. The sum is now larger than 12, 24 to be exact, but that will just put the rows fixed under each other, which you want in this case. On small mobiles, the input fields will now appear below the image. In this video, I have shown you how to create responsive forms. In many cases, you will generate a basic form using the application wizard and then apply your changes, saving you a lot of time. I hope that this video has given you the idea of applying your changes. PHsPeed also has several login templates that you can use, and it comes with full functionality, including multi-factor authentication. But that is something for another video. Thank you for watching.